Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we've got something of a sequel video for the last one we produced. Today we're going to look at the small arms that the ship carried in the 1980s. I think they're going to really surprise you because it surprised me. Now, in the last episode, we looked at what we believe a good approximation of the small arms that we would have carried in the 1940s and 50s were. These are the small arms that were issued to the ship to be used by a landing force. And we didn't have this ship's original document, so we were using the allotment for South Dakota class battleships, the class immediately preceding us. So we believe that that's pretty close to accurate. At a minimum, it's as good as we can get right now. And as we find more information in the future, we'll produce future videos. So this is very much in response to questions that you guys have had a lot over the last couple of years. What types of small arms were carried on board? And for today's video, we have the actual document from the ship's collection of what they carried in the 1980s. That's part of why the South Dakotas still have their documents and we don't have our World War II stuff. Because we serve into the 80s, we have the 80s documents, but the World War II stuff is all gone. Those ships that only served in the 40s still have their 40s era stuff. And so we're glad that they do. We're glad that we can see what we would have looked like in the 40s. We can see what that allotment is based on what they have. But we can also show you a more contemporary time period with firearms that aren't entirely contemporary. Before I get started, part of why we're making this video is I recently heard that another museum ship found one of their World War II firearms. Somebody donated it, and it matched a serial number to what they had in the collection. And I really want that to happen here. So this book not only talks about how many of each type of weapon we carried, it lists the exact serial numbers. So if you happen to, say, own a firearm of this type, or have been going through the civilian marksmanship's program to get some of the surplus firearms, especially those 1911 handguns that are being distributed right now, check the serial number. You might have a Battleship New Jersey gun on you. And if so, the museum would love to acquire it. First up on our list, the ship would have been issued 28 1911 A1 Colt 45 caliber handguns. And we got all the serial numbers right here. This is an incredible document, by the way. So really cool to see. Worth pointing out, again, just like the last video, these are the weapons issued to the ship that would have been handed out from small arms lockers like this one off of the wardroom to the crew as they're doing shore patrol, or they're on guard duty on the ship, or the master at arms, those sorts of things. Navy weapons being used by Navy sailors. The Marine detachment came with their own set of weapons. So they're going to be potentially different from the ones I'm describing here and in different quantities. So these 28 pistols are just the ones being used by the crew, not the ones that come with the Mardet. Although interestingly, this document shows that there are time periods when some of our handguns are given to the Marines and then given back. So there's a period of time here where 3 of them have been transferred to the Marines. So there's only 21 still being used by the crew. Another interesting thing is apparently when they issued the 1911s to the crew, they issued them with 2 magazines, each with 5 rounds, so 10 rounds total, which is exceptionally weird to me because the magazine pouches are 2-cell, and the magazines themselves hold 7 rounds, even if you don't have one in the chamber. So it's weird that they're issuing these magazines with 2 less than the total number of rounds, especially given that by this point in the 1980s, a military handgun with 7 rounds is kind of low. The rest of the military is starting to transition over to the Beretta M9 with 15 rounds in it. So I don't know why that's standard operating procedure, but we've got logbook after logbook that says that serial number 066 plus 2 magazines and 10 rounds total is handed to seaman whatever and then turned back in. So that's real weird. All right, so we've got those 28 1911s on board. This is really cool because it's the exact same handgun that was issued to the ship in World War II. Except during World War II, we carried 200 of them. So you can tell that ship's force is doing different jobs now than they were being prepared for in World War II. They're not being used as a landing force. Next up, the ship's crew was issued 14 12-gauge riot guns. That's how they're listed on here, specifically a shotgun, 12-gauge Mossberg Mod 500 MILS. So 14 of them would have been carried on board. If I remember correctly, the ship during World War II had something like 2 model 1897 shotguns. So again, you can see that this is more of a self-defense than a shore force thing. You're not going to land infantry with short-range shotguns, but a shotgun is a really ideal weapon for somebody at quarterdeck or somebody inside the ship where you've got really short-range distances to be using. Well, we didn't just get those 14 shotguns, we also carried 10 M60 machine guns. That's right, the crew was issued 10 pigs. While the shotguns are definitely for using on board the ship for self-defense situations, the M60s almost certainly would have been used as like railing mounted, and I'm not sure we had like flexible mounts to mount them on the railing, but you can still use the bipod to set them on the railing for those sorts of self-defense things at a slightly longer range. I'm not surprised to see a machine gun like this issued. I am surprised to see 10 of them instead of like 4, and I'm also somewhat surprised to see that it's the M60. This is the Vietnam era machine gun, and by the 1980s, we've switched over to things like the SAW, Squad Automatic Weapon. So this is starting to show us that the ship is not getting the newest and most modern stuff. And we saw that also in the World War II video, where they're being issued World War I era Springfield 1903s instead of the modern M1 Garands. Here we're also seeing stuff from the last war, where people are being issued M9s, we're still getting 1911s. Where people are being issued SAWs, we're still getting M60s. And if you thought that that was the end of the older weapon system that the ship got, you haven't heard anything yet. The rifle issued to the ship was still the old M14. During the Vietnam War, the ship deployed with M16 A1s. So it's interesting that those go back into the inventory, those that were brand new and modern. And in the 1980s, when she's coming out again, they're issuing her M14s. So these are very much old and out of use. The Marines of the Mardet are carrying M16 A2s, but the sailors are getting the older stuff, which is really interesting because I wouldn't think that there's a shortage of M16s that would require the issuing of this older system. The other interesting thing about this is during World War II, the ship was issued 350 rifles. Now we have just 40. So it further shows you doctrinal changes going on. Next up, we have another handgun. In this case, the 38 caliber revolver, 4-inch barrel, Ruger Security 6. It's extremely interesting to see these 4 guns here. I would not have been surprised to see revolvers issued to the ship during World War II. Just like we're seeing older issue rifles given to the ship so that the newer ones can be given to ground forces ashore, I wouldn't have been upset to see revolvers issued to the ship's crew so that the 1911s could be sent ashore. But no, 250 1911s, no problem. But now we've got just 28 with 4 revolvers. I'm not quite sure what the revolvers are being used for here. It's additionally surprising that it's 38 caliber. The US military did have .45 caliber revolvers that they issued during World War I and World War II that used the same .45 ACP ammunition that the 1911 uses. But instead we're carrying a completely separate type of ammunition for a second type of handgun. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. It has a barrel that's 1 inch shorter than the 1911, but it costs $12 more per gun in 1980s money. It's interesting, it shows the cost per unit with each of these as well. A Ruger Security 6 in 1982 would have cost you $174, so $12 more than the 1911s were valued at. But God only knows how old those 1911s were. I'm wondering if these were being used for training or target practice type stuff. During World War II, the ship was issued with .22 caliber, both rifles and pistols for training. But those were very much modeled after the full caliber guns. So the Mark II .22 caliber rifle was a Springfield 1903, basically rechambered for .22. The .22 caliber pistol had the same grip angle and control group as a 1911. So I'm really not sure about the revolvers. They are easier to maintain. A revolver has a lot less moving parts than a semi-automatic handgun. But you're already maintaining 28 of the semi-automatic handguns. Why do we have 4 revolvers? This one's probably my favorite thing on the whole list. We had 4 thumpers. They issue the ship with 4 M79 40mm grenade launchers. So this is another one of those Vietnam-era weapon systems that is still being issued out on the ship. Our Marine detachment had M203s on the bottom of some of their M16 A2s for the Grenadiers to carry. I'm not entirely sure what role the M79s were supposed to fill, and it looks like March of '83, we received 4, no other transitions, and then they give the 4 back to Crane, Indiana, when the ship is decommissioned again. So it doesn't seem like these are issued all that much. Maybe this is why we have that grenade locker up on the 03 level, maybe against small boats or hostiles trying to rush the pier. You can have somebody up on the 03 lobbing thumper rounds off the side. Really not sure about this one. This was not something I was expecting to find in here, and I'm excited to see it. It's one of those cool weapon systems. It's just not something I expected to see on a ship. So that really rounds out our combat weaponry. I was surprised to not see Stinger missile launchers, because Summerall's book lists those as being carried by Iowa-class battleships. 5 separate ones, according to Summerall. And we're seeing other fairly heavy weapons like the M60 and the M79. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a man-pad listed in here if we carried it. So it seems like New Jersey did not. What are some other weapons you're surprised that we didn't carry? I'm also surprised that we didn't have even M16 A1s while everybody else is getting M16 A2s. Or maybe more likely, like one of the carbine length weapon systems like the M4. I know that that's relatively new during this time period. Maybe it would actually be XM 177s or Colt 723s or whatever, not an actual M4 yet. But you would think that those carbine length rifles would be better to carry around a ship than a full 20-inch barreled rifle. I think that's what an M14 is. Maybe it's 22 inches. I don't know. Somebody will correct me down in the comment section. Anyway, our last couple of weapons, we carry pistol, Pyro Mark V, so flare gun. We carried 5 of those, but we also carried 3 pistol, Pyro AN/M8. I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between these 2 types, and I'm not sure what role they're providing, why we carry 2 different types. Again, like why are we carrying revolvers and semi-automatic handguns in 2 different calibers. But there you have it. We've got the 5 flare guns. That kind of lines up with the number of ship's boats that we carried. usually 6, but one of those is an Admiral's barge, so it might not have always been 6. We only carried an Admiral near the end of our career. So the 5 Mark Vs might have been for our ship's boats, and the 3 AN M8s might have been for signaling from the ship. Not entirely sure. Any gunner's mates from the 80s want to fill us in there, feel free to reach out. And then finally, we're carrying a pair of 22 weapon systems. So we would have been carrying 5 pistol, 22 caliber Smith & Wesson Model 46 match, and we would have been carrying 6 pistol, 22 caliber Colt Ace. So again, these are probably for training purposes, which makes it even weirder that we had those 38 revolvers on board. But that is, assuming this document is complete, a complete list of the small arms that the ship's company would have had to draw from small arms lockers like this one off of the wardroom in the 1980s commission. Again, let us know the stuff that you think is interesting that we're missing down in the comment section down below. And don't forget to check out the serial numbers of our 1911s and see if the one you got from the CMP might be one of those. The museum would love to acquire it. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about us and the channel. Thanks for watching.